Back in Black. I mean, you name it. You know, I just loved rock and roll, and it took me a while to actually get out and get the nerve up to do it myself.
So how does your background as a singer, the way you were singing and the type of music you were doing, how did you bring that to rock and roll then?
I think mainly just because I approached being on stage and performing with no fear. Just did what came natural to me and let it be an outlet for my emotions and to get out my pain and all the things that I had, you know, in my 20s, you know. And I think that I just approached it like that rather than I was not trying to get attention from record labels or from, you know, the media or anything like that. It was more of just like going and showing up to a show and then just, you know, bawling my head off through my song, you know, and just really allowing my emotions to show through my music.
One comment that I have, you know, regarding Felecia and what she just said is, you know, when I met her, the thing that I found really fascinating about her, besides the fact that she had an incredible, powerful voice and presence when she sang, was that she wasn't motivated by like business and like, you know, trying to somehow try to finagle her way into record deals and things like that. But there's a purity to what she does that shines through, you know. Whereas other people you can kind of call their bluff, you know. With Felecia, it's very real, her delivery.
I think that's evident in songs like Don't Go and Pour Over Me. They started out as poems, right? And then they were adapted to the music. Can you tell me about that process?
Yeah. You know, I don't write a lot of the songs that 100 Year Flood plays, but those are a couple of the tunes that we do. And Pour Over Me, you know, I just wrote it purely as a poem. Never had any intention to put it to music. And I was sitting up late one night, it's about midnight, and I heard Bill playing a song without the words. He was just coming up with a beautiful melody, and I was listening to it, and I said, well, this kind of goes with that, you know. I was kind of singing it in my head, and then I let him hear it, and he took the words and he just said, oh, this is it, and we never even had to change a chorus or anything. It just laid right over the top of what he had written. And Don't Go was the same way. They had actually recorded it here at Frogville the night before I came in and sang it. And that one was a little bit different. I had written it as a poem. Few of the lines, you know, I'd had an idea. But what I did is I took the words from Don't Go and the words from a couple of other poems and put them together on the spot. And when I recorded it, that was the first time I'd ever even tried to sing it, you know. So I was making up the melody right over the top of the band, you know, right there on the spot, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
and fun,
the results are really good.
Thanks.
Well, that is one technique that we like to use a lot. You know, you always hear about people when they're recording stuff or they're writing, sort of spending time and really thinking it through and taking their time to make sure that they have the right microphone or that the lyric lays in just the right way, and you know, kind of really hold it precious and sacred. And a lot of our technique is to really be put on the spot and make it happen in the moment. Don't Go, for example, which is probably my favorite 100 Year Flood song. Felecia was at home with our children, and Jim and Kendra and myself were sitting right here, and I just started playing this kind of I think it's like 4 chords in kind of a verse-chorus structure, and they started playing. We recorded it. The next night she came in. I was like, Felecia, check this out. What do you think about this? And she had her little notebook with poems and things, and she sat down, and actually I went outside because I was like, I don't want to influence you. I just want you to do what you do. And she sat down right here with a microphone and sang it, I think, in one take, just reading her poem. And it just has this honesty and this thing that doesn't feel overbaked, you know?
We did the same thing with a new song from our newest album we haven't released yet. It's called Bird Songs.
We use that technique a lot, actually.
With me, anyway.
So you're saying the creative process doesn't stop with just writing a song. It
No.
continues on in the studio.
It continues on in the studio. And a lot of times for me, the best things that happen in the studio are things that happen in the studio, that you don't bring in, you don't have preconceptions, but you let it come to life when the mics are all up and going.
Is that an advantage to Frogville versus recording at a big studio where your time is really, really going to cost a lot of money?
It absolutely is an advantage. You know, I think like a lot of the really famous bands, they have these big budgets, or they had the big budgets back in the days when there were big budgets. But, you know, so they can do that in a really nice studio. But I think most like indie artists and stuff, and lots of indie bands that I know, they sort of have to go into the studio and wham bam, thank you ma'am. The reason this studio was built was because Big John had started the record label, and he had thought, okay, well, if I go pay at some local studio to have records made, it's going to cost me many thousands of dollars per record. He was like, why don't I just put together the studio so that we can just do it, you know, on our own, and basically make 20 records for the cost of one record, which now is turning into, you know, 40 records or whatever. And I had a little bit of experience working with like 4-track cassette recorders and other records and being in studios and things, you know, but didn't really know a lot. And we just kind of, it's like when the artist was in here, it's like I was learning at the same time that they were learning, and so it was like there was this feeling of never being in a rush. You know, the first record we made, I think, took like 3 months, pretty casual. You know, I was making like minimum wage to do it, you know. And it's just grown over time and just gotten better and better over time, but it's still basically the same concept. We came in here last summer and made our new record. We hired an outside producer, but we made our record over the course of like a month and a half, you know. Not working every day, but working whenever we wanted, for however long we wanted. And so, yes, there is an advantage to that.
Lloyd Maines produced a record for you a number of years back. Was that the first 100-Year Flood album?
No, that was recorded by Mark McKinney, who is actually our nephew.
Really?
Who's a famous singer-songwriter down in Texas, country. He's doing really well. Lloyd Maines produced the band that I was in previously called the Sharecroppers.
Oh, right. Gotcha.
Lloyd Maines was one of the first people I ever worked with in a studio. When I was like 16, I went over to Lubbock to record a tune for a talent show, and I needed, you know, this great song without the words, you know, and he was the first person I ever worked with. He produced that, and so when I saw him when he was recording the Sharecroppers, I was on that album. I came in and did a duet with Bill. And it was really cool to see him and to be able to work with him again. He's an amazing producer.
Did working with Lloyd have an influence on you?
Lloyd was an influence because, you know, he has always been known as being very economical. We made that Sharecroppers record. We recorded the 12 songs that are on that record, but 13 maybe, I can't remember, in 3 days. And then we came back a month later and mixed it in 3 days. So 6 days we made that record. And it got radio play all over the state, all over the world. The band was doing really well. We were being courted by major labels and then just sort of dissolved under the pressure. But Lloyd, you know, his technique is less artistic, more utilitarian. That's where I differ from him, in that utilitarianism is good when you're on a budget.
Right.
But for me, I like for records to be artistic, you know, pretty much at all costs. You know, I want it to be beyond just representing what the band does. There's a few different ways to make records, you know, a few different ways to look at it. You can see it as like, this is the band, these are the members, we want it to sound kind of like a live performance. And then you put a few little bells and whistles. And then there's the idea of, we want this recording to be sort of bigger than life. We want it to be, you know, you want the live show to be based off of what the record did, as opposed to the record being based off of what the live show is. Mm-hmm. It's a couple different ways of looking at it, and I work both ways.